Welcome to the Wisdom Embassy, a place where hearts are strengthened, faith is awakened, and purpose begins to make sense. This channel is dedicated to sharing powerful spiritual motivation, deep biblical wisdom, and life-changing messages that help you grow in faith, courage, and understanding. Here we explore the truths that guide people through difficult seasons, inspire hope in uncertain moments, and remind every listener that their life carries a divine purpose. If you have ever felt tired of waiting, if you have ever prayed and wondered when your answer will come, if you have ever struggled to keep believing while the world around you keeps moving forward, then this message is for you. Today we are going to talk about something deeply personal and powerful, the season of waiting on God without losing faith. This message is not just information, it is encouragement for your spirit and strength for your heart. So take a deep breath, open your heart, and allow this message to remind you that your waiting season is not the end of your story. It is the place where God is quietly preparing something greater for your life. There are moments in life when waiting feels heavier than any burden we have ever carried. Waiting has a way of testing the strength of the human heart. It stretches patience and it challenges faith. Many people believe that progress only happens when something is moving quickly, but those who understand the deeper nature of life realize that some of the most important seasons are the seasons of waiting. Waiting is not empty time. Waiting is preparation. There are people listening right now who feel as if their lives have paused while the world continues moving forward. You see others achieving their dreams, building families, stepping into opportunities, and you begin to ask questions in the quiet spaces of your heart. You wonder why your season seems different. You wonder why the door you expected to open has remained closed. You wonder why the door you expected to open has remained closed. You wonder if the prayers you whispered in the middle of the night were truly heard, but the truth is that the silence of a season does not mean the absence of purpose. Waiting is one of the greatest classrooms in which faith is developed. Faith is not proven when everything appears quickly. Faith is proven when the promise has been spoken, yet the fulfillment has not yet arrived. Isaiah 40 reminds us of a powerful truth, that those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall run and not faint. The scripture reveals something extraordinary about waiting. Waiting does not weaken a person who trusts in God. Waiting strengthens them. Many people assume that waiting is passive but true. Waiting in faith is active. It is the decision to remain hopeful while circumstances appear uncertain. It is the commitment to keep believing even when visible evidence has not yet appeared. It is the courage to keep walking forward while trusting that the path ahead has already been prepared. There are people who lost faith in the waiting season because they expected immediate results. But those who are chosen by God often walk through seasons that others cannot understand. Their journey is different because their preparation is different. When God is preparing someone for a purpose, He does not rush the process. He shapes the character of the individual. He strengthens their heart. He teaches them patience, humility, and perseverance. Look at the life of Joseph in the book of Genesis. Joseph received a dream about his future, but the path toward that dream was filled with waiting. There were moments when his circumstances appeared completely opposite to the promise he had received. He experienced betrayal, imprisonment, and isolation. Yet the dream remained alive within him because it came from God. Joseph could have allowed disappointment to destroy his faith. He could have believed that the dream would never happen. But he continued trusting the purpose of God even when he could not see the final outcome. Years later, the fulfillment arrived in a way that proved every moment of waiting had meaning. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout Scripture. Abraham waited years before the promise of a child was fulfilled. During that time, doubt attempted to enter his heart, yet he continued believing the promise that had been spoken. The waiting season was not wasted. It developed his faith to the point where he trusted God beyond what seemed possible. Psalm 27 declares, "Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord, be strong." and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. The scripture repeats the instruction because the human heart often struggles with patience. People want answers quickly. They want solutions immediately. But the deeper work of God often happens in quiet seasons where transformation occurs beneath the surface. Think about the process of planting a seed. When a seed is placed in the ground, nothing appears to be happening at first. The soil remains still and silent, but beneath the surface life is forming. Roots are developing. Strength is growing in places that cannot yet be seen. If someone judged the seed too early, they might assume nothing was happening. Yet the unseen growth is preparing the seed for the moment when it finally breaks through the surface. Waiting on God works in a similar way. A silence does not mean nothing is happening. It means preparation is taking place where human eyes cannot see. Where human eyes cannot see. Some people feel discouraged because they compare their journey to the journey of others. They see someone else receiving what they prayed for, and they wonder if they have been forgotten. Comparison is one of the greatest enemies of faith because it distracts you from your own path. God does not prepare every person in the same way. Each individual carries a different purpose, and therefore the preparation will look different. Jeremiah 29 reminds us that God has plans for our lives, plans to prosper us and not to harm us, plans to give us hope and a future. That promise does not guarantee that everything will happen quickly. It guarantees that the outcome of the journey will reflect the goodness of God. Sometimes waiting protects you from stepping into something before you are ready. Sometimes waiting protects you from connections that would distract you from your purpose. Sometimes waiting allows the right circumstances to align so that when the opportunity arrives, you are prepared to walk through the door with confidence. Faith grows strongest when it is exercised during uncertainty. Hebrews 11 tells us that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. This means faith operates even when physical proof has not seen. This means faith operates even when physical proof has not yet appeared. It allows a person to believe in a promise before the fulfillment becomes visible. There will be moments when the voice of doubt attempts to interrupt your hope. There will be moments when the voice of doubt attempts to interrupt your hope. Doubt may whisper that the waiting has lasted too long. It may try to convince you that your prayers have been ignored. But doubt cannot cancel the plans of God. Lamentations reminds us that the Lord is good to those who wait for Him, to the soul who seeks Him. It is good that one should. But it is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Waiting quietly does not mean abandoning action. It means trusting that God is working even when life feels slow. The chosen ones are not those who never struggle with questions. They are the ones who continue believing despite those questions. They choose faith even when fear tries to dominate their thoughts. They choose patience even when frustration attempts to rise. They choose hope even when circumstances seem uncertain. Faith is not the absence of emotion. It is the decision to trust God while experiencing those emotions. Even David expressed moments of waiting in the Psalms. In Psalm 130 he wrote, "I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in His word I hope." You see, here David expressed moments of waiting in the Psalms. In Psalm 134, thank you, Whites, "I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in His word I hope." David understood that hope must remain anchored in the promises of God rather than the changing conditions of life. When hope is anchored in circumstances, it rises and falls with every situation. But when hope is anchored in God, it remains steady even during storms. Storms are part of every journey. There will be seasons when life feels overwhelming. During those moments, the waiting season may feel even more intense. But storms do not last forever. And often the greatest breakthroughs arrive after the longest periods of waiting. People who give up during the waiting season often walk away just before the door begins to open. But those who remain faithful discover that perseverance leads to fulfillment. James reminds believers to let patience have its perfect work so that they may become mature and complete, lacking nothing. Patience is not weakness. Patience is not weakness. Patience is strength under control. It is the ability to remain steady while trusting that the right moment will arrive. When you understand this truth, you begin to see waiting differently. Waiting becomes an opportunity to grow rather than a punishment to endure. During the waiting season, God develops quay. During the waiting season, God develops quay. Qualities within you that will become essential in the next chapter of your life. He strengthens your character so that success will not destroy your humility. He strengthens your character so that success will not destroy your humility. He deepens your faith so that blessings will not replace your dependence on Him. He expands your understanding so that when the promise arrives, you will recognize the responsibility that comes with it. The chosen ones are often shaped in quiet places. They are prepared during seasons when few people notice their journey. But the purpose of those seasons is not to hide them forever. It is to prepare them for the moment when their calling begins to unfold. Because preparation often happens in silence. The world celebrates visible success, but heaven values invisible transformation. There are seasons when God works deeply within the heart of a person, while the outside world sees very little change. Those seasons can feel lonely, they can feel confusing, yet they are sacred moments where character is being formed. Many people want the promise, but they do not understand the preparation that comes before the promise. Preparation requires patience. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to grow when no one is applauding your progress. But this is the path that shapes the chosen ones. Think about the story of David before he became king. David was anointed long before he ever sat on the throne. The promise was spoken over his life, but years passed before the fulfillment appeared. During those years, David faced challenges that tested his faith. He experienced rejection. He faced danger. He lived in caves while someone else occupied the throne that had been promised to him. In those moments, David could have questioned the promise. He could have assumed that the delay meant the plan had changed. But instead, David continued trusting God through every season of uncertainty. Psalm 37 reminds us of a powerful principle. It says, trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him and He will act. That passage reveals something important about waiting. Waiting does not mean you stop living. Waiting means you continue growing while trusting that God will act at the right time. The chosen ones learn how to live faithfully in the present while believing in the promise of the future. Sometimes people imagine that faith removes every moment of doubt or struggle, but the reality of faith is more human than that. Faith is the decision to keep believing even when emotions fluctuate. There will be days when you feel strong and confident about the future. There will also be days when questions rise in your mind. That does not mean your faith has disappeared. It means you are human. Even in those moments, God remains faithful. The book of Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. There is a season of planting and there is a season of harvesting. When you plant a seed, you cannot demand a harvest the next day. The seed requires time. It must grow roots. Wood must grow roots. It must develop strength before it produces fruit. In the same way, the promises of God unfold according to divine timing rather than human impatience. Waiting is not punishment. Waiting is alignment. Sometimes God is aligning circumstances around you. Sometimes He is aligning people who will become part of your journey. Sometimes He is aligning opportunities that you cannot yet see. If the promise arrived too early, you might not recognize its value. If the opportunity appeared before your character was ready, it could create more problems than blessings. This is why patience is one of the greatest demonstrations of faith. Romans 12 encourages believers to be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. Those three principles create a foundation that sustains a person through long seasons of waiting. Joyful in hope means you choose optimism even when the future is not fully visible. Patient in affliction means you remain steady even when challenges appear. When challenges appear. Faithful in prayer means you maintain connection with God during every stage of the journey. Prayer is powerful during the waiting season because it reminds you that you are not walking alone. It brings peace to the heart when circumstances feel uncertain. Philippians 4 speaks directly to this when it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving present your request to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds." Peace becomes the companion of those who trust God during waiting. The chosen ones understand that peace does not always come from having answers. Does not always come from having answers. Sometimes peace comes simply from knowing who holds the answers. Life can feel unpredictable, but God remains consistent. His promises do not expire. His plans are not interrupted by human limitations. Isaiah 55 reminds us that God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and His ways are higher than our ways. This means there are moments when we cannot fully understand the timing of events. But trust allows us to believe that the bigger picture is unfolding according to wisdom greater than our own. Many people lose faith because they interpret the delays as denial. But delay and denial are not the same. A delay often means preparation is still happening. It means there are details being arranged that will eventually create a stronger outcome. Consider the example of Hannah in the book of 1 Samuel. Hannah experienced deep sorrow because she longed for a child, but the answer did not come immediately. Her heart carried pain and longing for years. Yet Hannah continued praying. She continued trusting God even when the waiting felt overwhelming. When the answer finally came, the blessing was not only a child, but a child who would grow into a leader and prophet. Her season of waiting was connected to a purpose far greater than she initially understood. This is one of the mysteries of divine timing. The waiting seasons often connect to outcomes that reach far beyond the present moment. Sometimes your waiting is preparing you for a role that will impact others in ways you cannot yet imagine. Sometimes the strength you develop during the waiting season becomes a strength that encourages someone else in their own journey. Your story becomes a testimony that faith works even when the timeline feels slow. The book of Galatians reminds believers not to grow weary in doing good, because at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. It's at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Notice the phrase proper time. The harvest is connected to the right moment. A farmer does not harvest crops in the middle of the growing season. Harvest comes when the fruit has matured. God works with that same wisdom. He does not release certain blessings until the season has reached the point of readiness. This is why discouragement must be resisted during the waiting season. Discouragement tries to convince you that nothing will change. But faith reminds you that change is already in motion, even if it has not yet appeared. When you remain faithful during the waiting, you are demonstrating trust in the unseen work of God. The chosen ones learn to measure progress differently. They do not measure progress only by visible results. They measure progress by the growth of their character, the strength of their faith, and the depth of their relationship with God. Those qualities become the foundation for everything that follows. Psalm 46 reminds us to be still and know that God is God. Stillness does not mean inactivity. Stillness means confidence that God remains in control even when life feels uncertain. When you carry that confidence, your heart becomes steady. Fear loses its power. Doubt loses its influence. You begin to understand that the waiting season is not a sign that your life is standing still. It is a sign that preparation is unfolding behind the scenes. God often prepares the stage long before the moment of revelation arrives. God often prepares the stage long before the moment of revelation arrives. The chosen ones are those who refuse to abandon faith during the quiet seasons. They continue walking with God even when the road ahead is not fully visible. They keep believing that every prayer spoken in sincerity has been heard. And as the waiting season continues, something beautiful begins to happen within them. Their faith becomes deeper than it was before. Their patience becomes stronger than it was before. Their perspective becomes wiser than it was before. And slowly they begin to realize that the waiting season itself has become part of the miracle. Waiting season itself has become part of the miracle. Because something powerful happens when a person remains faithful in a season that most people would abandon. Waiting begins to transform the way you see life. At first, the waiting season feels like a delay. It feels like time is passing while nothing significant is happening. But over time, you begin to notice something deeper taking place within your spirit. Your heart becomes stronger. Your trust becomes deeper. Your understanding of God becomes more personal. You begin to realize that waiting on God is not about losing time, but about gaining strength. Many people chase opportunities quickly because they fear being left behind. They believe that if they do not move immediately, they will miss their moment. But the chosen ones understand. Do something different. They understand that what God has prepared for them cannot be taken by someone else. What belongs to you by divine design will not pass you by. This truth brings peace to the heart. It removes the pressure to compete with the world around you. Instead of rushing into situations that may not be right for you, you begin to trust that the right moment will appear when the preparation is complete. Proverbs 3 gives one of the clearest instructions about this journey. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. Notice that the instruction is not to understand everything. The instruction is to trust. Human understanding is limited because it only sees the present moment. God sees the entire journey. Because in entire journey, He's shaping you. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end all at once. This means that what appears confusing today may become clear tomorrow. The delay that feels frustrating today may become the protection that saved you tomorrow. The chosen ones begin to develop a perspective that goes beyond immediate emotions. They learn to see waiting as part of the story that God is writing in their lives. Think about the life of Moses. Before Moses led a nation, he spent many years in the wilderness. Those years were not filled with recognition or applause. They were quiet years where he lived far from the influence he once had in Egypt. From a human perspective, those years might have looked like a setback. But from the perspective of divine preparation, those years were essential. In the wilderness, Moses learned humility, patience, and dependence on God. Those lessons became the foundation for the leadership role he would later carry. Sometimes the place that feels like a delay is actually the classroom where God is teaching you what you will need for your next chapter. The waiting season becomes a place where wisdom grows. James reminds believers that if anyone lacks wisdom, they should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. This shows that the waiting season is not only about endurance, but also about learning. While you wait, you begin to understand life in deeper ways. You begin to see the difference between temporary success and lasting purpose. You begin to recognize the importance of character over recognition. You begin to value peace over popularity. These lessons create stability within your life. They prepare you to handle the blessings that will eventually arrive, because blessings without preparation can become burdens. Opportunities without character can become distractions. Success without wisdom can become dangerous. This is why the waiting season matters so much. It protects you from receiving something before you are ready to carry it. The chosen ones may not always enjoy the waiting season, but they eventually recognize its value. They realize that every moment of patience has been shaping them into someone stronger than before. Psalm 62 expresses this idea beautifully when it says, "Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from Him. Truly He is my rock, and my salvation comes from Him." Truly, He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. Resting in God does not mean giving up on your dreams. It means trusting that the timing of those dreams is secure in His hands. When your heart reaches that level of trust, something remarkable happens. Anxiety begins to fade. The pressure to control every outcome disappears. The pressure to control every outcome disappears. Instead of forcing doors open, you begin to walk calmly, knowing that the right door will open when the moment arrives. Revelation speaks about the authority of God to open doors that no one can shut and shut doors that no one can open. That truth reminds us that destiny is not controlled by human approval. It is guided by divine authority. The waiting season teaches you to depend on that authority rather than the opinions of others. People may question your patience. People may question your patience. They may ask why you continue trusting when results have not appeared yet. But your faith is not built on their understanding. Your faith is built on your relationship with God. Hebrews 10 encourages believers not to throw away their confidence because it will be richly rewarded. It says you need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised. Perseverance is the bridge between promise and fulfillment. Perseverance is the bridge between promise and fulfillment. Without perseverance, many people give up halfway through the journey. They walk away from the path just before the breakthrough arrives. But those who continue trusting eventually see the reward of their faith. Think about how a sculptor works with stone. When someone looks at a large block of stone, they may not see anything special. But the sculptor sees the image hidden within the stone. Each strike of the tool removes a small piece. At first, the progress seems slow and almost invisible, but gradually the shape begins to appear. In the same way, God shapes the lives of those who trust Him. Each season of waiting removes something unnecessary. Each moment of faith strengthens something valuable. Little by little, the person you are becoming begins to reflect the purpose that was placed inside you. This transformation does not happen overnight. It happens through consistent faith over time. The chosen ones understand that the journey with God is not a sprint, but a lifelong walk. Micah reminds us of the simplicity and depth of that walk when it says, "What does the Lord require of you but to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God?" Says, what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly, love. Walking humbly with God means trusting Him with every step, even when the path ahead is not completely visible. There will always be moments when uncertainty appears. There will be seasons when the answer you are waiting for takes longer than expected. But the faith that grows in those moments becomes the anchor that holds your life steady. Psalm 121 says, "I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from?" My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. This reminder places everything into perspective. The same God who created the heavens and the earth is the one guiding your life. Nothing in your journey is outside His awareness. Every prayer you whispered has been heard. Every tear shed during moments of doubt has been seen. Every moment of faithfulness during the waiting season has been noticed. And the story of your life is still unfolding. The chosen ones are not defined by how quickly their dreams appear. They are defined by the strength of their faith during the process. They become examples of patience in a world that values speed. They become examples of hope in a world that values speed. They become examples of hope in a world that often loses confidence. They become examples of trust in a world that constantly searches for control. As the waiting season continues, something deeper begins to form within their spirit. Their faith is no longer dependent on visible signs. Their hope is no longer dependent on immediate results. Their peace is no longer dependent on perfect circumstances. Instead, their faith becomes rooted in the unchanging character of God. And that kind of faith creates a foundation that cannot easily be shaken. Because when faith reaches that depth, it begins to influence every part of your life. You no longer see waiting as a burden that steals your joy. Instead, you begin to see waiting as a sacred space where God prepares your heart for what is coming next. The chosen ones slowly discover that the process is just as meaningful as the promise itself. In the early days of waiting, the heart often focuses only on the outcome. People pray for the moment when the door finally opens. They imagine the day when everything will change. But as time passes, something interesting happens. The heart begins to mature. You start to value the lessons you are learning along the way. You begin to understand that God is more interested in who you are becoming than in how quickly something arrives. Character becomes more important than speed. Wisdom becomes more valuable than recognition. This transformation is powerful because it shifts your perspective from impatience to trust. Romans 5 speaks about this journey in a very clear way. It says that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint because the love of God has been poured into our hearts. Notice how the scripture connects perseverance with character and hope. Waiting seasons often contain challenges, but those challenges develop strength that cannot be created in comfortable situations. When everything happens easily, it is difficult to grow. But when faith is tested, it becomes stronger. The chosen ones often walk through experiences that stretch them emotionally and spiritually. Those experiences shape their understanding of life. They begin to see beyond temporary struggles and focus on eternal purpose. 2 Corinthians reminds believers that the troubles we face are light and momentary compared to the eternal glory they are achieving for us. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, because what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. This perspective changes the way you interpret delays. Instead of assuming that something has gone wrong, you begin to trust that something meaningful is being built within you. Faith allows you to see beyond the present moment. Faith remit, and you that God's work is not limited to what you can currently observe. There are people who lose faith because they focus only on the visible results. There are people who lose faith because they focus only on the visible results. But the chosen ones understand that the invisible work of God is often the most important work of all. While you are waiting, your mind is being renewed. Your priorities are being reshaped. Your spirit is becoming stronger. These inner transformations prepare you for responsibilities that may come later. Luke reminds us that whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. With very little can also be trusted with much. This principle shows that faithfulness during small seasons prepares a person for greater opportunities. The waiting season often looks small from the outside. It may seem quiet or unremarkable to others, but inside that season, something significant is happening. Your ability to remain faithful in quiet moments becomes the evidence that you will remain faithful when greater opportunities appear. The chosen ones develop habits during waiting that sustain them later in life. They learn to pray consistently, even when answers take time. They learn to remain grateful, even when circumstances are not perfect. They learn to encourage others even while they are still waiting for their own breakthroughs. These habits create a life that reflects faith rather than frustration. These habits create a life that reflects faith rather than frustration. Philippians reminds believers to continue working out their faith with reverence because God is working within them to will and to act according to His purpose. Notice that God works within you even before He works through you. The internal preparation always comes before the external assignment. Sometimes people want the platform before they develop the character required to stand on it. But God protects His children by allowing preparation to come first. This preparation is not always comfortable, but it is always valuable. Think about the process of refining gold. When gold is placed in intense heat, the impurities rise to the surface and can be removed. Without that refining process, the gold would remain mixed with things that weaken its purity. In the same way, life sometimes brings situations that reveal hidden attitudes or weaknesses within us. The waiting season exposes those areas so they can be transformed. Instead of seeing those moments as failure, you can see them as opportunities for growth. God does not reveal weaknesses to shame you. He reveals them so that you can become stronger. Psalm 66 says that God tested us and refined us like silver. He brought us through fire and water, but then brought us to a place of abundance. Notice that refinement comes before abundance. The chosen ones understand that the road to blessing often passes through seasons of preparation. During those seasons, patience becomes a daily practice. Patience is not simply the ability to wait. It is the ability to keep the right attitude while waiting. Anyone can wait with frustration, but waiting with faith requires strength. It requires the ability to guard your heart against bitterness. It requires the ability to guard your heart against bitterness. It requires the willingness to believe that something good is still ahead. Proverbs reminds us to guard our hearts because everything we do flows from it. Because everything we do flows from it. If your heart becomes overwhelmed with discouragement, the waiting season will feel unbearable. But when your heart remains connected to hope, the waiting season becomes manageable. Hope is a powerful force. Hope allows you to see possibilities beyond present limitations. Hope reminds you that the story of your life is not finished. Jeremiah wrote about this hope when he declared that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases and his mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Even when circumstances remain unchanged, God's faithfulness. See, on to news. Each day becomes another opportunity to trust him. Each morning becomes another reminder that your journey is still moving forward. The chosen ones learn to appreciate these daily moments of grace. They recognize that life is not only about the big breakthroughs, but also about the quiet faithfulness that happens every day. Each prayer whispered in faith matters. Each decision to remain hopeful matters. Each act of kindness during your waiting season matters. These small acts build a life that reflects the character of someone who trusts God deeply. Colossians encourages believers to set their minds on things above rather than things on earth. Rather than things on earth. This does not mean ignoring the realities of life, but it means placing your ultimate confidence in God rather than in temporary situations. When your mind is focused on God's promises, your perspective becomes stable, even when life feels uncertain. You begin to realize that the waiting season is shaping you into someone capable of carrying greater responsibility. Your patience becomes deeper. Your compassion becomes stronger. Your understanding of others becomes more empathetic. Because when you have walked through long seasons of waiting, you learn how to support others or walking through similar journeys. Your story becomes a source of encouragement. Your story becomes a source of encouragement. You become a reminder that faith can endure even when the road is long. The chosen ones often become lights for others because they demonstrate what it means to trust God through every stage of life. Matthew reminds believers that a light should not be hidden, but placed where it can shine for everyone. The patience you develop today may become the testimony that inspires someone tomorrow. The patience you develop today may become the testimony that inspires someone tomorrow. The faith you maintain today may become the encouragement someone else needs to keep going. Your waiting season is never meaningless. Every moment carries potential for growth and impact. As you continue trusting God, something remarkable begins to happen within your spirit. Your faith becomes steady. Your heart becomes peaceful. Your confidence becomes rooted in something deeper than circumstances. And slowly you begin to understand that the waiting season is not simply about receiving a promise. It is about becoming the person who is ready to live inside that promise. And when a person begins to understand that truth, something inside them changes. The waiting season no longer feels like a prison. It becomes a place of transformation. It becomes a quiet workshop where God shapes the heart, mind, and spirit of the one who is willing to trust him. Many people believe that the greatest moments in life are the moments when prayers are finally answered. But those who walk closely with God eventually realize that some of the most sacred moments happen before the answer appears. They happen in the silence when faith chooses to remain strong. Because faith is not proven when everything arrives quickly. Faith is proven when you continue believing during the days when nothing seems to change. Psalm 40 captures this journey with simple but powerful words. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. Notice the order of the process. First there was waiting, then there was deliverance. Waiting often comes before elevation. Many people admire the victory, but they do not see the quiet seasons that came before it. The chosen ones are often hidden before they are revealed. Their faith is strengthened in private before it becomes visible in public. God prepares them in ways that the world may never fully understand. Look at the life of Elijah for a moment. Before Elijah stood boldly before King, as a nation, he spent time in isolation, being sustained by God in quiet places. He experienced moments where he felt alone and uncertain. Yet even in those moments, God was guiding his path. 1 Kings reminds us that sometimes God does not speak through the dramatic events people expect. There was a wind that tore through the mountains. There was an earthquake that shook the ground. There was fire that passed by. But God was not in those things. Then came a gentle whisper. This teaches us something profound about the waiting season. Then came a gentle whisper. God often speaks most clearly in quiet moments. When life becomes still, your heart becomes more sensitive to his voice. The noise of constant activity fades, and you begin to recognize the gentle guidance of God. The chosen ones learn how to listen during the waiting season. They learn how to hear wisdom in moments of silence. They begin to understand that God is not absent simply because life feels calm or slow. They begin to understand that God is not. Sometimes the quietness of a season is the very environment where divine direction becomes clear. Isaiah once wrote that, in returning and rest you shall be saved in quietness, and trust shall be your strength. Quietness and trust are powerful companions. When the world around you demands constant motion, quiet trust becomes an act of courage. Quiet trust becomes an act of courage. It takes courage to believe that God is working, even when nothing dramatic is happening. It takes courage to remain hopeful when the timeline stretches longer than expected. But courage grows every time you choose faith over fear. Fear whispers that nothing will change. Faith whispers that something greater is unfolding. Fear focuses on limitations. Faith whispers that something greater is unfolding. Faith focuses on possibilities. 2 Timothy reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. That sound mind becomes essential during a waiting season. Your mind must remain anchored, read in truth rather than drifting into discouragement. Truth reminds you that God is faithful. Truth reminds you that his promises do not expire. Truth reminds you that the journey is still moving forward, even when progress feels slow. The chosen ones learn how to speak truth to their own hearts. They remind themselves of the promises found in Scripture. They remember the ways God has helped them in the past. They choose gratitude even when the full picture has not yet appeared. Gratitude is powerful because it shifts your focus from what is missing to what has already been given. 1 Thessalonians to what has already been given. 1 Thessalonians encourages believers to give thanks in all circumstances because this is God's will for those who trust him. Giving thanks does not mean pretending that challenges do not exist. It means recognizing that God's goodness continues even during difficult seasons. When gratitude fills your heart, the waiting season begins to feel lighter. Hope becomes stronger. Peace becomes deeper. You begin to notice small blessings that might have been overlooked before. A moment of encouragement from a friend, a quiet answer during prayer, a new understanding that brings clarity to your thoughts. These moments remind you that God's presence is constant. The chosen ones become people who recognize the value of these small signs of grace. They understand that faith is not built only through large miracles. Faith is often built through daily moments of quiet trust. Consider the story of Noah. Before the flood came, Noah spent years building the ark. During those years, there was no rain like the kind that would cover the earth. People around him likely questioned his actions. Yet Noah continued building because he trusted the instruction he had received from God. Hebrews describes Noah as someone who acted in faith even when the evidence had not yet appeared. That is the perfect essence of waiting with faith. You continue building the life God has called you to build, even when others do not fully understand why. You continue preparing for the promise, even when the promise has not yet arrived. The chosen ones are builders during the waiting season. They build their character. They build their discipline. They build their relationship with God. These foundations become essential when the time comes to step into greater responsibility, because the moment of fulfillment will eventually arrive. Every promise spoken by God carries within it the certainty of completion. 2 Peter reminds believers that the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient. This verse reveals something important. What humans often call delay, God calls patience. God sees time differently than we do. While we focus on days or months, God sees the entire story of our lives. His timing considers factors we cannot see. He sees the opportunities ahead. He's shaping you. He sees the people whose lives will intersect with yours. He sees the challenges that may arise and prepares you to handle them. All of these elements come together in the perfect moment. The chosen ones begin to trust that moment even before it arrives. Their confidence grows not because they have control over the future, but because they trust the one who does. And as this trust deepens, their hearts become peaceful in ways that surprise even them. The anxiety that once filled their waiting season slowly fades. The questions that once troubled their thoughts begin to lose their urgency. Instead, there is a quiet assurance growing inside them. An assurance that God has not forgotten them. An assurance that every step of their journey is part of something meaningful. An assurance that the waiting season itself has been shaping them into someone ready for what is coming next. And as that understanding settles into their hearts, they begin to walk through each day with renewed strength, trusting that the story God is writing is still unfolding. And when a person reaches that place of quiet trust, something remarkable begins to unfold inside the heart. The waiting season no longer feels like standing still. It begins to feel like walking through a hidden path that only God understands. Every day may look ordinary from the outside, but inside your spirit, something sacred is taking place. Something sacred is taking place. The chosen ones slowly begin to see that waiting is not a wasted season, but a season filled with invisible movement. God works in ways that the human eye cannot easily detect. While you're waiting, He's shaping you. While you're waiting, He's arranging moments that will one day connect like pieces of a larger story. Many people only see the final chapter when the promise becomes visible. They celebrate the breakthrough. They celebrate the victory, but they do not see the many quiet mornings and long nights that came before that moment. Those quiet seasons are where the real transformation happens. The heart learns endurance. The mind learns patience. The spirit learns surrender. Surrender is one of the most powerful lessons in the journey of faith. It means releasing the need to control every detail of life and trusting that God's wisdom is greater than your own plans. Proverbs reminds us that many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the purpose of the Lord that prevails. This verse does not discourage planning. Instead, it invites humility. It reminds us that even the best human plans must remain open to the greater purpose of God. Sometimes the waiting season is the place where our plans are gently reshaped. We may begin the journey expecting one path, but through prayer, reflection, and growth, we begin to see another direction emerging. God often guides His people step by step rather than revealing the entire journey at once. Psalm 119 says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Notice the imagery of a lamp rather than a floodlight. A lamp illuminates only the next few steps. It provides enough light to move forward, but not enough to see the entire distance. Faith often works in the same way. God gives enough guidance for the next step and invites us to trust Him for the rest of the journey. The chosen ones learn how to walk in that kind of trust. They do not require every detail before they move forward. They simply follow the light that has been given to them, and as they take each step, their confidence grows. Because each step reveals another small piece of the path. Because each step reveals another small piece of the path. Another moment of clarity, another reason to believe that God is truly guiding their life. This gradual unfolding of purpose creates a deep relationship between the believer and God. Faith stops being an abstract idea and becomes a daily experience. Prayer becomes more than words spoken in moments of crisis. Prayer becomes a conversation that shapes the direction of life. Jesus once taught about persistence in prayer through a parable that appears in Luke. The message of the story was simple yet powerful. People should always pray and never lose heart. Those words speak directly to the waiting season. When answers do not arrive immediately, the temptation to lose heart can become strong. But persistent prayer keeps the heart connected to hope. Prayer reminds you that your story is still being written. Prayer reminds you that God is listening, even when the answer takes time. The chosen ones often develop the strongest prayer lives during their seasons of waiting, because in those moments they realize that their greatest strength comes from staying close to God. The waiting season draws them into deeper dependence. Instead of relying only on their own abilities, they begin to rely on divine guidance. Psalm 34 expresses this dependence beautifully when it says, "I sought the Lord, and He answered me and delivered me from all my fears." Fear is one of the greatest challenges during waiting. Fear whispers that the future may never change. Fear tells you that the delay means failure. Fear tries to convince you that hope is pointless. Fear tries to convince you that hope is pointless. But faith answers fear with truth. Faith reminds you that God is faithful, even when circumstances are uncertain. Faith reminds you that many stories in Scripture were shaped by long seasons of waiting. Abraham waited decades for the fulfillment of the promise that he would become the father of many nations. Joseph waited through years of hardship before stepping into the leadership role that had been revealed in his dreams. David waited through seasons of danger and uncertainty before becoming the king he had been anointed to be. Each of these individuals experienced moments when the promise seemed distant, yet each story ended with fulfillment because their faith remained alive. But Asko, but Harpazed remained alive. These stories were preserved in Scripture not only as history, but also as encouragement for those who would face their own seasons of waiting. Romans reminds believers that everything written in the past was written to teach us, so that through endurance and the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. Hope is the fuel that keeps faith alive. Without hope, the waiting season becomes heavy and exhausting, but when hope is present, even long delays can be endured with patience. Hebrews describes hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. An anchor keeps a ship steady during storms, but anchor keeps a ship steady during storms. In the same way, hope keeps your heart steady when life feels uncertain. The chosen ones learn how to hold on to that anchor. They remind themselves that God's promises are trustworthy. They remember that His timing is wise. They continue walking forward even when the destination has not yet appeared. Over time, something amazing happens. The waiting season begins to shape their character in ways they never expected. They become more compassionate toward others who struggle. They become more patient with the process of growth. They become more grateful for the small blessings that appear along the way. These qualities transform the person they are becoming. The waiting season is quietly building a life that reflects the character of someone who trusts God deeply. 1 Peter speaks about faith being refined through trials so that it may prove genuine and result in praise, glory, and honor when the purpose of God is revealed. Refinement always requires time. Just as precious metals are purified through fire, the human heart is strengthened through seasons that test its faith. But those tests are not meant to destroy you. They are meant to reveal the strength that God has placed within you. Every time you choose faith instead of despair, you become stronger. Every time you choose hope instead of discouragement, your spirit grows deeper. Every time you choose patience instead of frustration, your character becomes more mature. And every your character becomes more mature. These decisions may feel small in the moment, but over time they create a powerful transformation. The chosen ones eventually look back on their waiting season with a new perspective. What once felt like delay begins to look like preparation. What once felt like silence begins to sound like guidance. What once felt like loneliness begins to reveal the closeness of God that was present all along. This realization fills the heart with gratitude. You begin to understand that God was never distant. He was shaping your life step by step. He was strengthening your faith moment by moment. He was preparing you for a future that required a stronger version of the person you once were. And as this understanding settles into your spirit, you continue walking forward with confidence, knowing that the same God who carried you through the waiting season will also guide you into the fulfillment that lies ahead. And as that confidence begins to grow within the heart, the waiting season slowly transforms into something that feels sacred. The same season that once felt heavy begins to feel purposeful. The silence that once felt confusing begins to sound like quiet instruction. The chosen ones start to recognize that God has been speaking all along, through moments of reflection, through scripture, through prayer, and through the gentle guidance placed inside their spirit. Through prayer and through the gentle guidance placed inside their spirit. Faith matures when a person begins to see God not only in the dramatic moments, but also in the quiet details of daily life. The sunrise that appears every morning reminds you that God's faithfulness continues without interruption. The breath in your lungs reminds you that life itself is a gift that continues one moment at a time. Psalm 19 declares that the heavens declare the glory of God and the skies proclaim the work of His hands. Declare the glory of God in the skies. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. Creation itself carries a message of consistency and faithfulness. A consistency and faithfulness. The sun does not rush to rise earlier because someone is impatient. The seasons do not change because someone demands immediate results. Everything unfolds according to the order and timing established by God. When you observe the rhythm of creation, you begin to understand that waiting is part of the natural design of life. Seeds wait in the soil before they grow. Trees wait through seasons before they bear fruit. Rivers wait as they slowly carve paths through mountains. Nothing in nature is rushed yet. Everything eventually fulfills its purpose. The chosen ones begin to align their hearts with this rhythm. They stop measuring progress only by speed and begin measuring it by growth. They stop comparing their timeline to the timelines of others and begin trusting the unique path that God has placed before them. Comparison often creates unnecessary pressure. When you compare your journey to someone else's journey, you forget that every life has a different calling. What God is building in your life may require a different kind of preparation. Your waiting season may be shaping qualities that another person's journey never required. 1 Corinthians reminds us that there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. Each person carries a unique assignment. Each person carries a unique assignment. When you accept this truth, you begin to release the pressure of comparison. Instead of asking why your journey looks different, you begin to ask what God is teaching you through this season. This question opens the door to growth because the waiting season often contains lessons that can only be learned through patience. You learn how to trust God even when you cannot predict the outcome. You learn how to maintain peace even when the future remains uncertain. You learn how to value the process rather than focusing only on the destination. These lessons build a foundation that will support you when the promise finally arrives. So, when the promise finally arrives, because when the door opens, you will need the wisdom developed during the waiting season. You will need the humility developed through quiet reflection. You will need the strength developed through perseverance. Ecclesiastes reminds us again that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. There is a season of planting and a season of harvesting. There is a season of building and a season of celebrating. There is a season of building and a season of celebrating. The waiting season belongs to the stage of planting and preparation. During this stage, roots grow beneath the surface. Roots are not visible, but they determine the stability of the tree that will eventually rise above the ground. Without deep roots, the tree would collapse when storms arrive. With the deep roots, the tree would collapse when storms arrive. In the same way, the chosen ones develop spiritual roots during their waiting seasons. Those roots connect them deeply to God. They learn to depend on His guidance rather than relying only on their own strength. Jeremiah speaks about this type of life when he describes a person who trusts in the Lord as being like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream. Such a tree does not fear when heat comes because its leaves remain green. It does not worry in a year of drought because it continues to bear fruit. This image reveals the power of deep spiritual roots. When your faith is rooted in God, external circumstances lose their power to control your peace. Storms may come, but they do not destroy you. Delays may appear, but they do not break your hope. Your life remains stable because your foundation is strong. The chosen ones become people whose stability encourages others. Your chosen ones become people whose stability encourages others. Friends, family members, and even strangers begin to notice the peace they carry. They see someone who remains hopeful even when situations look difficult. They see someone who continues trusting God even when answers take time. That example becomes a quiet testimony. People begin to ask questions about the source of such strength, and in those moments your waiting season begins to reveal its deeper purpose. It prepared you not only for your own future, but also to become a source of encouragement for others. 2 Corinthians explains that God comforts us in our trouble so that we can comfort others with the same comfort we have received. Your journey through waiting may one day help someone else find hope during their own difficult season. The patience you develop today may become the wisdom you share tomorrow. The faith you practice today may become the encouragement that lifts another person's spirit. Nothing that God allows in your life is meaningless. Nothing that God allows in your life is meaningless. Even the seasons that feel slow are shaping something valuable. Romans reminds us that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Notice the phrase, all things, not only the joyful moments, but also the confusing ones. Not only the breakthroughs, but also the confusing ones. Not only the breakthroughs, but also the waiting seasons. All of these experiences work together to form the story God is writing in your life. The chosen ones eventually learn to trust that story. They begin to see life not as a series of random events, but as a series of random events, but as a journey guided by divine wisdom. Each day becomes an opportunity to walk in faith. Each moment becomes a chance to grow in patience. Each challenge becomes an invitation to trust God more deeply. As this understanding grows, the waiting season begins to feel lighter. Hope becomes stronger. Peace becomes deeper. Confidence becomes steady. The heart no longer asks whether God has forgotten. Instead, the heart rests in the quiet assurance that the same God who began the work will complete it in the right time. And as you stand at this point in your journey, you begin to understand something that many people never discover. Waiting on God was never meant to break your faith. It was meant to build it. Every quiet moment, every unanswered question, every day when you chose hope instead of despair has been shaping the person you're becoming. The waiting season was not empty time. No, it was sacred preparation. He's shaping you. It was sacred preparation. The chosen ones are not defined by how quickly their prayers are answered, but by how faithfully they trust while the answer is still on the way. Your patience has been strengthening your spirit. Your perseverance has been building your character. Your prayers have been creating a deeper connection with God that no circumstance can take away. Scripture reminds us in Habakkuk that the vision awaits its appointed time, it hastens toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it may seem slow, wait for it, because it will surely come, and it will not delay. That promise is a reminder that God's timing is never late, and His plans are never uncertain. So do not lose heart. Continue walking with courage. Continue trusting even when the path is not fully visible. The same God who carried you through the waiting season is guiding every step of your future. Your faith has not been wasted, your patience has not been ignored, and your hope has not been misplaced. Because the story God is writing in your life is still unfolding. And the moment you have been trusting Him for is moving closer with every step you take in faith.